right. Okay, works the first time. All right. Okay, some of you might remember that before I usually have to run the DH client program to get to the internet connection. I don't have to do it anymore today. As it turns out, it was a DNS server issue on campus. Now, how did I know that? Because during an interview, I was one of the interviewers. I was on the interviewer panel. So during one of the demonstration where the interviewee required internet access, it failed. And then within an hour or so, we got an email from district office or district IT saying that, whoops, we have a DNS server issue. So I'm suspecting that issue has been around all along. It's just decaying to the point where on Friday, it just completely pooped out. But I was seeing signs of that because I was using Linux, and I guess Windows will try to reconnect every single time, whereas Linux will just make one connection and say, hey, give me the DNS server address within the same request. So that's why most people did not catch it. But if you run Linux, it would have caught it like the first time. So I just think that's kind of interesting. All right. So what I have done so far today is I'm trying to run Android Studio because I think it's the more updated version of the interface. So we might as well just kind of get used to it now instead of later. That may or may not work because I may not have all the necessary components on this live installation of Linux to get it to work. So this is the first thing we'll do, is to see if this will at least get started. If it doesn't get started, I'm just going to go back to the other version. Yeah, it's still complaining, so I guess it's not gonna work here. All right. Fatal could not create the Java virtual machine. So there's some problem here. I have to rebuild the live distribution to get this part to work. So I'm not going to worry about that too much. I got it working at home, so I know it's going to work. I just need to update my live distribution to have the latest JDK or Java Development Kit to get it to work. Okay, so today is a continuation from last Wednesday, where I was trying to make a hierarchical list of items. So I got it working for the most part. So the first thing I need to do is to start up the virtual machine. And since Android Studio is not working, I still have a fallback of the SDK, which is kind of like the older version. It still works. It's just that they say, okay, don't use this because it's not the current tool set anymore. But it still works. It will still get itself updated. So there's no real concern here. It's just that gradually I would like to switch over to the newer version. Are there any questions from your projects? I'm hoping that you guys are starting to code your projects, and are there any questions, any problems that you guys run into, anything you don't know how to do? Yep.
Mine's doing the same thing on Firefox. Remember that error that we had on Monday?
Uh-huh.
It's doing the same error.
I got the same thing again. So now I make snapshots. They don't call it snapshots. They call it something else. They call those checkpoints. So from here on, I just make a lot of checkpoints. Whenever I do something, make a checkpoint before I do it. Especially deleting like massive amounts of blocks and whatnot. So I don't know how to fix that problem because it doesn't seem like it's something that I can fix on my end. We can take a look again, during the lab time.
Okay.
Yep. That problem may have something, I cannot confirm that either, but it might have something to do with having multiple browsers open to that project at the same time. I don't know. Yeah, because with me that's possible. I might have several computers with browsers, opening the same project at the same time. But in your case, I'm not sure whether that's the case or not. All right, so we'll go ahead and start up the virtual machine first, because that's what we need to do to test the program. I don't really, well, I guess I do, because in this case, it is definitely a program that requires a virtual machine. So this time it starts up without any problem, whereas before we have had issues. All right, so this is the application. It has got multiple screens. As you can see, it has got 2 screens. Screen 1 is, I reserve it as my splash screen, so I don't really do anything with screen 1, except since my main objective is to test the hierarchical list mechanism. So I just make screen 1 start up the second screen automatically without any delay, because that's I can do the splash screen later on. That's not what I really want to do or what I want to demonstrate here. So in the blocks of screen 1, this is all it does. In the initialize event handler, the only thing it does is to open up the second screen, which is called screen boot selector. So all the logic is not here, it is in the second screen. But we'll come back here and do some modifications here just to see that the second screen is working properly. So here's the logic of the second screen, or we can look at the designer first. So the designer has a list view component here, and just a label component over here. So there are only like a few visible components, but it does have a few non-visible components. We have a web1 component, which is needed in order to do JSON decoding. We have a file1 component, which is also needed in order to read from a file, which is now uploaded as an asset to this particular project. And then the last one is a notifier. The notifier at this point for this particular screen is nothing more than a debugging aid, because unlike most other actual development platforms, App Inventor does not have any actual debugger. You cannot execute code on a block by block basis, or at least I don't know how to do it. Okay, there may be a mechanism, but I don't quite know how to do it yet. Okay, so the notifier is really just for debugging purposes. It doesn't really serve any functional purposes in the program itself. And here are the blocks, okay? So before we go any further, let me run the application so they can see where it is at this point, okay? At the end of today's class, I will upload it to Moodle, so anyone who wants to kind of borrow this kind of code, you can feel free to do it in your own projects. So the emulator is up and running. I just need to get a window to open so I can run the actual command line commands. So we'll save it. Oops. There we go. So we'll go to Platform Tools and just run ADB start server. And it will list all the devices that are attached. It is attached. So now we can go ahead and install the program that the APK file that I have just downloaded. There we go. So now we go to the application and test run it. It's load longer. There we go. So as I said, the first screen really doesn't do anything, and it is working. The first one here, I know it's hard to read. It's fearful, angry, disgusted, sad, happy, surprised, and bad. And it also displays a description, which is what I want to associate with the main screen. So I will show you guys the XML file a little bit later, so you can see how all the information is actually encoded into the XML file. If I click on one of these, let's say sad, then it will list all the subcategories of sad. I did not actually put any description under sad, and that's why there's no description. So there's hurt, depressed, guilty, despair, vulnerable, and lonely. But if I click on one of these things, it's not going to do anything because it doesn't have any sublist. So this is the bottom of the entire hierarchy. If I click on one of these, it will actually close the screen and go back to screen 1. But it will do a close screen with result. So screen 1 actually can potentially get the result and display the actual selection. Okay, I haven't put in that logic here. So let's go back to App Inventor, make a few changes, and then we can test it again. So So let's go back to the designer. The first thing I want to fix is the font size of the list view, because it's way too small right now. I'm gonna pick, like 44 at least. I think 50 even, is not too bad. So we'll go ahead and pick a 50 here. And then we'll go back to screen 1 so that we can actually display something on screen 1 based on what screen 2 has selected. So I put a label here, move a label into here, and in the blocks I have to say, okay, when screen mood selector returns a value, go display something. So let me just test whether you guys already know how to do it, okay? Because this is related to the homework assignment. So how do I get started with what I want to do? I want to display the mood that is selected by screen mood selector. So how do I get started with that? Which event handler? Who owns the event handler that I need to make use of? There's only one component here that has event handlers, which is screen 1, right? So I click on screen 1, and then we take a look at all the event handlers. Okay, backpress, yeah, no, probably not. Initialize, no. Other screen close, maybe that's what I need. Okay. Now, since I only have one other screen, I am not going to make use of other screen name. Okay, it's not necessary to make use of that in this case. On the other hand, if you have one screen that can potentially start like 3 or 4 different other screens, then you have to make use of other screen name, so that when there's a result coming back, you know, okay, which subscreen gave me a result. Then you know how to process it accordingly. Okay, but in this particular application, at this point, it doesn't have multiple screens, so I don't need to process other screen name. The only thing I need to do is to process result. So I go to label, and I just scroll down the list and say set the text of label 1 to the result that I'm getting. That's all I'm going to do. So not a whole lot of changes, just minor little changes to the program. And then we'll go ahead and build the APK file again just to retest it.
So the difference there is like we take it from screen 1 to 2 and you send the value and then take start value, like
it doesn't send a start value to the second screen.
Right, but yeah, because this is when we're coming back.
Yeah, it takes it back because the second screen's purpose is to pick a particular value. The utility of the second screen is only for picking a particular value that you pass back to the first screen.
Right.
Now the first screen doesn't really do anything with it other than just displaying it, but that is the demonstration.
Right. I wasn't able to get the start value to come back to screen 1 until I used that.
Okay. Yeah.
It was not liking it.
Yeah, there's only one way to do it. Okay, so let me.
But once I figured that one out, everything was fine. It's like you have it there.
Okay, let me set this up, and because I think this will be helpful, because this is normally something that I would use the whiteboard, but since I got this new tool. Okay, some people say it's a toy, but it's not. It is definitely not a toy. My kind of toy would shoot stuff, so this is not one of those. All right, so let me see. I'm going to put the base unit over here, but I'm actually kind of impressed that this is only $100. Whereas in Elmo, the actual devices used by elementary schools and whatnot, those would run you at least $400 or $500 easily. Okay, that's easily $400 or $500. And this one is just, to me, it works just as well, and it's all plugged in. And the best part is I can use a variety of tools to actually see the result. VLC is one of those. And VLC, for those of you who don't know, stands for Video LAN. I cannot remember what the C stands for. Okay, it will see it as a video device. And we can just do a play, just to make sure that we can see everything. I know it's not in the right orientation. That's fine, we can fix that later. Okay, so we need to move this one over, or just tilt the lens a little bit more. It has no zoom control, unlike the more expensive stuff, but I can just kind of reposition stuff to get it to work a little better. Too much on the other side. There we go. Almost. It has a lot of flexibility. It also has the flexibility of not putting over a piece of paper, but also putting it over a cell phone or put it over a tablet. So this way you can actually see the tablet screen using this. Now I know it's not rotated correctly, but that's easy to fix. Go to Tools, Effect and Filters. This is one of those kind of weird things that most movie players would not even imagine having. Because with this one, you can go to Rotation, and now we can set it to any rotation. So I think, yep, that's the right orientation, 270 degrees. And I just need to resize the screen a little bit. It keeps having a little border. I don't understand why there's a border around it. But it's still working. Okay, next thing I do is to just use a regular pen. All right, so this is good. Also has a little autofocus button. So there we go, autofocus. And it also has manual exposure control, so I can make it a little brighter. There we go. All right. I think the form factor is wrong, so we'll take a look at aspect ratio. No, that's not right. Let's take a look at video aspect ratio. We try 4:3. Does that look about right to you? I think that's about right, actually. Okay. All right, so we have two screens here. This is screen 1. And we have another screen that screen 1 starts. Okay, so this is a screen. I'll just call this screen 2, okay, because it doesn't really matter how we call that. In order for screen 1 to start, to initiate and pop up another screen, you need to use open another screen, right? Okay. So this is open another screen with a start value. So from the perspective of screen 2, it can use the start value to see what screen 1 is trying to send it. Is that making any sense? But the other way around is not to use open to start screen 1 again, but to use close. But when you use close, it becomes a result value. And the way to intercept or get to the result value is in screen 1, you use what we just described here on the projector itself here, is to use other screen closed.
And so this would be like if you had several different, let's say like you're going through a catalog and they're picking different things from different places, but always coming back to that same.
Yep.
This is how you get the different values from different places back to that.
Right, but the problem, it's not so much of a problem, it's just something that you have to be aware of, is you only have one other screen closed event handler to receive the results coming back from all potential screens they can start. So that's why in here, you have to compare other screen name to all the potential screens that can potentially send you back a result, and then you decide how to process the result accordingly. So it does complicate the logic a little bit because it cannot have one other screen closed per screen that can that you can start up. There's only one of these event handlers, so you have to differentiate which screen just closed and gave me a value to process.
And so you would do that within that event. You wouldn't have more than one of the other screen closed event handlers.
Correct. If you have more than one of these, it will give you a warning because that won't work. So what you need to do, let me just kind of do this exactly how it's supposed to be done. So what you need to do is to do a text comparison, and you want to compare the other screen name to what you're expecting or potentially can be expecting. So in this case, my other screen name is screen mood selector. So I go to text here, and I just use a literal string to input screen mood selector. So this way, this is the proper way to do things. I was just trying to shortcut it because there's only one other screen. But this would be the proper way to do it because you only get one event handler. And this is the way to kind of make sure that, okay, I know I just got a result back from screen mood selector. This is what I want to do to process that. Is that working well? Okay. Yep.
Then you want to put equals there instead of
Yes,
less than.
that's correct. We want equal to and not less than. Thank you. Very good. So if you have additional screens that you want to process, what you do is you just put in your additional else ifs. So you compare other screen name to the names of the other screens they can potentially be receiving results from. So that's unfortunately this is the only way to do it. If you have any complicated logic that you need to use to process the result, I would suggest using procedures. So this way the actual main logic is no longer specified within the event handler, so your code would look cleaner. But since I only got one screen to deal with, this is just what I want to use for demonstration purposes. Okay. Any questions, concerns? Nope. Okay. All right. So given this particular application is relatively simple, this is all I'm going to do. So I want to do it again, build the APK file again, and then retest this one, because this one will display the actual mood selected. Once we verify the operation of this thing, I have one more thing to do that I didn't quite finish, because in my office I was not able to get the virtual machine started. So I would like to test that part too. We go back to a terminal, re-upload, and reinstall the application. And then go back to the emulator, mood logger. Here we go. All right, so this time we can see the text a lot better than last time, because last time it was really tiny. So we'll pick happy this time. So happy, playful, and screen one displays playful. Okay. In other words, the program actually knows where is the end of the entire list. So when you select the last item, it just goes like, oh, okay, this is the final choice. This is what you want to select as the actual choice. Okay, so this works. I will test one more thing because I think the back button is actually supposed to be working too. So we'll go ahead and test the back button for this particular application. So we'll pick surprised and press the back button. It's supposed to go back to the previous screen, and okay, it does, but it doesn't select the text anymore. It's supposed to go back here and reselect surprised. I'm not really sure whether it's a limitation of App Inventor or I just used the wrong thing to do it, but I'm pretty sure this is an App Inventor limitation more than anything else. But it does allow you to use the back button to go back to the previous screen, so they can actually reselect based on the previous category. So it allows you to move down the list. It also allows you to back up the list. So this is all all that I wanted to do based on what we talked about on last Wednesday. Okay. What if you go back one more time? In other words, this is the first selection list already. If you go back one more level, you should go back to the previous screen without selecting anything. And that's what it did. So the application is actually working. I will upload the Aia file for those of you who want to consider integrating this into your program. I can remember a few projects that might be able to use something like this. I remember there's one project about traveling as a traveling agent assistant for currency conversion. So if you're doing currency conversion, or you're picking a foreign country or a foreign place, you can start with the continent, then you can go to country, or you can start with a region, then you can go to country and stuff like that. So having a hierarchical list like this can potentially be helpful, because you can have North America, South America, Europe, Asia, Australia, and so on. And then from each continent, except for Australia, they can pick which country is that you want to select. So I can see potential application in some of your applications. Also in one of the applications where there's the requester of a service, and then there's the service provider. This is also something that you can consider, so that you end up with like a long list of potential requests, but people can drill down to the detail relatively easily. So you can start with like labor based service, like shoveling snow or picking up lots of big debris, to something that is more refined, like my computer is broken, I need someone to take a look at it. So you can have categories of things that people can request, and then within each category you can divide it into subcategories, and then depending on how fine of an item you want to specify, you can drill down to like really detailed categories. So that it's just an idea, okay? Just an idea that you can consider using. Okay. All right. So now that the app is working, or we verify the app is working, let's see how it gets it done. Okay. So we go to, most of the logic is in screen mood selector. So even though in this particular application it is selecting a particular mood, don't let it bother you, okay? It really is just reading off of a list. Depending on what you put on the list, you can you can make it select any variety of things. This is the key. There's a file here called emotions.txt, and I'm going to download it to the PC so that we can take a look at it. So we'll go ahead and take a look at emotions.txt, which supplies the entire thing, everything that is needed for for this particular screen to work. So we'll go ahead and open that document right here. Okay, so this is what unfortunately, I changed the way it's structured a few times, so the indentation is actually not entirely correct. But it still reflects the structure of the code here. Let me see if I can find a beautifier to get it look nice again. That will be, this is JSON, J-S-O-N, and beautifier. There we go. Formatter and validator. Okay, looks about right. Okay. Now since my text file here does not really contain any sensitive data, I feel okay sending it over to something like this. Now on the other hand, if your JSON file may contain credit card information and stuff like that, you don't want to send it over to just some random validator / formatter, because they can be logging everything that you send over. So anything that has contains sensitive or private information, don't do it this way. Okay, make up some fake data for testing. Okay, but what I do, it's not really a big deal. So I will go to here, and we can specify compact. Well, I don't know what compact would look like. Let's just use 2 spaces, and then click process. And now we have a formatted JSON file, and it is also validated. In other words, if I have missing brackets, it would have complained about it. Okay, now it is formatted. I guess this will copy the clipboard. Allow and remember. And see if we can paste it back into the document. So we go back here. Say new, Control C. No, that's still the old one. Okay, save. All right. Let's download it. Download this as emotions.txt, and we'll put a .1 here so we can differentiate between the two. So go back to the editor, reopen the other file. You can see it's quite a bit bigger too, because of all the indentations, all the extra spaces. But when we open it, this time it has all the indentations correctly done. So this is a tool that you might want to consider using if you want to use a JSON file to encode everything first. Okay. Now this is the important part. The important part is how everything is encoded. So the overall list, okay, which is represented at the root level, is a list of 2 items. Okay. This is the first item, which is a list by itself, and this is a list. The rest is another list. Okay. Each list is actually a key value pair. This is the key, and this is the value. This is the key, and this really long list is the value. Okay, and the reason why I make this a key value pair list is it's easier for me this way to locate. Okay, where's the description? Where are the subcategories, and so on. Are we still doing okay so far with the overall structure of the JSON file? Okay. So you can easily adapt this file to do whatever you want. Okay, you don't have to describe emotions. You can describe just about anything that has a hierarchical structure. So in here, when you look at the subcategories, which is only abbreviated as a sub, we have the main categories. So one main category is fearful. Another one is angry. Another one is disgusted, and so on. But when you look at each one, let me see if I can find a shorter one so it's easier to visualize. I think surprised has probably the shorter list. Okay, so we'll take a look at surprised. So within surprised, the string surprised is the key, so it is the first item of a key value pair. The second item of the key value pair is by itself a pretty long list. Okay, so if you look at this list here, I think it goes up to maybe here. This is a long list, but what is this list? This is a list that is actually a list of key value pairs again. And once again, we use a sub here as the key to indicate the following is a list of subcategories. And in this case, we're missing a description. So if we want to add a description, it's pretty easy. Okay. So we'll just go ahead and add a description over here. Description is by itself a key value pair with a key of description and a value of however you want to describe surprise. Okay, you can say this is how someone feels when the unexpected happens, when something unexpected happens. Okay, so now we have a description with surprised, and to get this to work, it's easy. You just save this file, but this time we want to save it as emotions.txt to overwrite the original file. Replace it. Externally modified. You want to continue saving? Yes. Go ahead and save it. So then we go back to the app inventor thing. Go to emotions.txt. You cannot upload a new file to overwrite a file that is already uploaded. So the only way to do it is to delete the one that is in the project already. But this is just a copy that I have already uploaded. So now we can upload the version that I want to make use of, which is this one here. And definitely make use of the timestamp to make sure that you're uploading the more recent version. So click open, click OK, and now this new version is uploaded. Now the application has to be rebuilt in order to make use of this new text file. So we have to go to build and save APK file again to rebuild it. Now this is one way to do it. The way I do it is I package the hierarchical file, or the file that describes the hierarchical categories, within the application itself. Now you don't have to do it that way. If you don't want to do it this way, and you say that I want to be able to update that list on a very regular basis, you can use the web component and just find a place on the internet that you can put that file, and your application can go onto the web to download that file. So this way it's a lot more dynamic. Okay. You can also save a local version of that file. So when you don't have internet access, you can keep using the file that is already downloaded. but it can check the web component. Every time you start the application, the web component can go onto the internet and say, okay, do I have a newer version to download? If there's a newer version to download, then you download the newer version, save it locally, so this way you don't have to go onto the internet every single time, and yet you can keep that list updated. Is that making any sense? Okay, all right. So we'll go ahead and test it again because we want to make sure that this mechanism of updating just that text file can change the behavior of the program because it's describing to the code what we want it to do. So we go back to here to reinstall the updated version and go back to the emulator, start it again. Uh-oh. Oh, unable to decode. Okay, so it's broken. The formatting thing that, oh, okay, I know why. It's not the formatter that is not working. I forgot to put a comma here and another comma here. Okay, I keep forgetting the comma. So let's go ahead and save it again. And this is the part where it's kind of a chore because every time you update a file, you have to delete it and then re-upload it. But if you put it on the web, then it's actually easier because you don't have to rebuild the APK file. So we have to browse, upload it again. Just because I fixed 2 commas, I have to go through this whole process again. There we go. All right, switching back to the emulator, we'll start the app again. Okay, this time it's good, and I think we made a change to surprised. So when I click on surprised, this description here should change accordingly. It should say this is how someone feels when something unexpected happens. So this means the file is working, and also we are making use of the description associated with an entire category of emotions. So with this, you can have any number of levels of details. Okay, there's no limitation to how many details or how many levels of categories you can embed into the file. Are there any questions about what this program is doing or what it's trying to demonstrate? No questions? Okay. So without any questions about what it is doing, and then we will try to look into how it is doing it. So once again, let me just go ahead and build the project, download the Aia file and upload it onto Moodle. So this way, for those of you who want to make use of this code, you can just go ahead and use this as a basis. Okay. So here's the download, and I need to log into Moodle. Upload it. Is anyone considering, integrating this into your own project? No one? Nobody cares. Sorry?
Useful.
Well, maybe at some point, with some application, you will find it useful. Yeah. All right, so let's go to 362. And we'll go to advanced techniques. Oh, we have to enable, try and edit it on. I'm just going to add it here as a file. And just call it hierarchical category option selector. Okay, so now I have it uploaded. You guys can download it, and if you want to, you can just kind of save it. If you want to incorporate it into your projects, then go ahead and do it. So what I want to do is to go into the blocks, because obviously the user interface is really, really simple. There's nothing to talk about over there. So we'll go into the blocks, and this is a utility function that we have seen already. I'm going to collapse this one little block here because it's not really used. That's why you see it grayed out. Okay. So with this one, you give it a subcategory list. And it's the job of this subroutine or procedure, however you want to call that, or function, is to go through the entire list and pick out all the options. So we'll take a look at how it's doing it. The first thing we notice is it's making use of a local variable. So it has a parameter, which is sublist. This is the input into the procedure. It has a local variable called result, which starts off as an empty list. And then inside we have a do result block. This do result block here is just a way to express that we have some actions to perform, but at the end of the action, we want to have a particular value as the result. Okay, that's the entire purpose of this block here. It has two slots. The top slot, basically specifies something to do, and then the bottom slot says, okay, after this is all done, what is the value of this action? Okay. So in this case, it's rather, kind of straightforward. Okay, we have this entire thing to do, which is just a for each block, and then whatever result is the end result of the entire thing. So this result is the result of the do result block, which is also going to be the result of this block, the local variable block, which also becomes the result of the entire subroutine. Okay. All right. So obviously the magic is with the for each block here. The for each block is going to go through each item in the sublist or the subcategory list and do some processing with it. Now each item in the subcategory list, each item consists of a name, which is the key, and potentially a list that can be huge as the value. So what I do is for each item, I am doing some processing first. Okay, so we'll take a look at this part here. For each item, I'm just going to say, okay, give me the first item of that sublist, because for each item is a key value pair. So I'm just interested in the key, and I'm just saying, okay, I don't care about the value. I just need to know what the key is. So the key becomes this item. This item is added to the list, and which list are we talking about? It is the result. So I'm just adding the key of each item to the result. So result becomes eventually becomes just a list of the keys of the key value pair list. That's a long way to describe it. Okay. So getting back to the text file, I can show you exactly what I mean by that. So let's go back to the text file here. Okay, so this part here, starting from here and ending, unfortunately these are pretty long, so it's kind of hard to see both the beginning and the end. Okay, I think that's kind of the best I can do here. I can shrink the font size just a little bit. So let's go ahead and shrink the font by just one notch. Okay, there we go. Okay, there we go. Because this one is already formatted, the indentation, should match. So in this case, this is what the input looks like for that procedure. And you can see that each item in this overall list, each item this is one item. It starts off with a name as the first item, and in this case it has a value, which is an empty list over here. But remember, I'm not even interested in the second item. So I'm extracting, in this case, startled, confused, amazed, and excited, and turn these 4 strings into its own list. Okay? Now this is a very important utility function, because this is how I get all the elements in order to initialize a list view component. Okay? So now we switch back to the app Inventor code here, and I'm going to zoom in. Okay, let me see if I can maybe over here. There we go. So I'm zooming in a little bit so people in the back can see a little bit more of the screen here. So this is extract options. there's an initialization here, and this particular program makes use of the concept of a stack. Now, I'm not really sure how many people know the concept of a stack from your other programming classes. The concept of a stack is also known as last in, first out, okay, or LIFO, L-I-F-O. It's useful here because I use this to keep track of all the sub-menus. Okay? So every single time I get down to one additional level, I will maintain that using a stack structure. So when I use the back button, I can also keep track of, okay, I'm backing out of a subcategory, but where am I going to back up to? So I can keep track of the entire history. This is not anything different from the history of your browser. Okay, so let's say you're going to Wikipedia, and you drill down to more and more articles without opening new tabs. So when you're done reading the last page, what do? You press the back button on your browser. And what does that do? It brings you back to the previous page. So you finish reading that page and you press the back button again, what does it do? It brings you back to the previous page. That is a stack structure. It is last in, first out. The last page that you visit is the first one that you back out of. Okay. So I'm using exactly the same type of ordering here. So it's called a stack. Now with a stack, there are several options that you can do. One is called popping. I'm not going to talk about pop first. We'll talk about push first. Okay. When you push something onto the stack, quote unquote push something onto the stack, you're putting an item onto it. You're adding an item onto the stack, which is equivalent to pressing a hyperlink in a web document. So your history gets one entry longer, but that one entry that is, that's the last item that you add is also the most recent one. Is that okay? So what I'm doing here is I'm using the first item of the list that I call stack as to keep track of all this information. So whenever I click on the list view component and there is one more level to go, I will remember that using the stack push procedure and just push that onto the stack. What is it pushing onto the stack? Well, it's really just whatever the parameter is. The stack itself is a global variable, and I'm always putting it at the beginning of the entire stack. Okay? So this is pushing. The other operation you can do with the stack is what we call a pop. Okay? Now this looks more complicated, but it really is not. Okay? The two conditional statements is really just for error checking purposes. The outer one is making sure that the stack is still a stack, is still a list, excuse me, it is still a list, which really should not be, there should be no chances that it is not a list. The second one is more practical because it makes sure that the list is not empty, okay? Because if the list is already empty, I cannot perform the third block, which is to remove an item from the list. So this is the actual operation with a stack pop, which is essentially just taking the first item out. That's it. It is equivalent to pressing the back button on a browser. Okay? But it does make you have to make use of that item before it disappears from the list. But nonetheless, this is the way we keep track of the multiple levels of detail that we're drilling into. Are we still doing okay so far with these concepts? Push is just putting an item into a LIFO, and then pop is to remove an item from a LIFO. Last in, first out. Okay? Okay, so these two are fairly simple. It's really just, okay, let's add an item to the beginning part of the list, and let's remove the first item from a list. Okay. And then we have initialize. Okay, so when we initialize, we use the global variable would list and use it to make a list to become the input to the push. In other words, every single time we push an item onto this stack, there are two items to become the actual list, which becomes an item that we're pushing on the stack. The first part is pretty clear why we need that, okay, which is the list that is responsible for this level of categories. The second item is not so clear, Okay, what is this 0 doing here? Why do we need to keep track of a 0? That is the selection index of that level. 0 means I do not have a selection yet. Because if you select the first item of a list view, it has a selection index of 1. So if the selection index is a 0, which is what I'm trying to remember here, it is just saying, okay, I haven't selected anything yet. Okay. So that's just for keeping track of the stuff. And this initialized subroutine is called from somewhere else. Okay. We already explained extract options. And let's not deal with this one first. Oh, this is stack top. Okay, stack top doesn't really add anything to a stack. It does not remove anything from the stack. It simply tells you what is on the top of a stack. Now remember, with a stack structure, the top of a stack is the most recent item that you put into the stack. Okay. In the case of a browser, this is the URL of whatever you're viewing at this point. That is the top of the stack. Are we still doing okay so far with that concept? Last in, first out, basically. Okay? All right. And you can probably see a big, huge block on the other side. That really is the main part of this screen here. It's making use of the top of the stack and use it to populate a list view component. That's what it's doing. Okay? So let's take a quick look at what this is doing. It has a lot of nesting, but it's not really complex in terms of control structure. In other words, it doesn't have a whole bunch of loops inside the conditional statement, inside another bunch of loops. Okay. The first top part here is we have a local variable called top. The only reason why I have this local variable called top is so I don't have to call stack top over and over again. It's for efficiency purposes more so than anything else. Okay? Because you can see how the local variable top is initialized. It is only storing the result of stack top, which is the most recent category that we have just added to the stack. That's all it does. And then we do all the processing down here. The first thing we do is we set the elements of the list view emotions list view component to the following. We are setting it to, okay, we call extract options, okay, which we already took a look a little bit earlier. It took all the key of a key value pair list and then make its own list as a result. And what are we using to make that happen? So this is everything start with this block here. This block is just saying, okay, give me the top of the stack. Okay, we'll say the top of the stack is a list by itself with two items. The first item is the list that is representing the category. The second one is representing the selection index of that level of categories. So I'm not interested in the selection index. I'm only interested in the list itself. So that's why I'm extracting only the first item out of the item that has the list that has two items. That becomes the pairs into this block here, lookup in pairs, because it might contain description as one of the key. It might contain sub as one of the keys. I'm not interested in description at this point. I just want to know what are the subcategories of this particular item. So that's why I use this global variable string sub, which only specifies sub as a string, to specify the key. This is supplying all the key value pairs. This is supplying the key, and if it is not found, I just return the not found word itself. So the value of this lookup in pairs block is now fed to extract options, because by itself, the result of this should be a list of subcategories. So the list of subcategories is supplied as an input into extract options. Extract options will turn all the sub-options into just a string, a list of strings representing the options, and that that list is now used to initialize the elements of my list view for all the items that I can visualize. Are there any questions about the first block? No questions? Okay. The second one is doing about the same thing, except this time I'm interested in the second item. Okay, well, excuse me. This time I'm interested in the description, if there is one. If there's no description, this is where the no description text comes from. Because with some of the emotions, I haven't got the time to actually type up an explanation of that particular emotion. So that's why there are no descriptions for those. Now this part here is basically saying if the top of the stack, if the second item of the top of the stack, which is supposed to be the selection index, if it is greater than 0, that means I actually have something to restore. I have to restore which item in that list view was selected earlier. So I was using this mechanism, set list view emotions dot selection index, to attempt to make that item selected again. Apparently this is not working, so I should probably add some comment here and say that does not seem to work. Okay, does not seem to work. Visually, nothing is highlighted when selection index is set. Okay. But I don't really know why that is the case. Well, let's see if Google knows anything about this. Selection index app Inventor. And we're talking about the list view. All right, so this is the full explanation from the App Inventor website itself. And when you look at selection index, it explains it as the index of the currently selected item starting at 1. So we know that part already, that's not a concern. If no item is selected, the value will be 0. Okay, so the way I use 0 to initialize a particular level is correct. If an attempt is made to set this number to a number less than 1 or greater than the number of items in the list view, selection index will be set to 0, and selection will be set to the empty text. Okay, but it doesn't say anything about visually, is it going to highlight the item that I am selecting? And it appears to me that it does not do that. Okay, so this is not helping. Let's see if there are more explanations here. Okay, tutorials and examples. Okay, maybe I should add a word here, set. There we go. Yep, doesn't seem to. Okay, so when this is not working, okay, so let's say this is your problem. Okay, you're trying to make a particular thing work in your application. Your program is fairly complicated already, like something that we have here, and you're just saying, okay, but how come the selection index, by changing it, it is not reflecting it visually? Is it my code or is it App Inventor not doing it? Okay, how would you deal with this problem? How about writing a very tiny app just to test it? Okay, so that's what we'll do. Now, because I know this program is working for the most part and I just made some changes to it, in order not to lose this program because of any file corruption issues, I'm going to make a checkpoint. So these are the checkpoints that I have made already, and by making checkpoints, it's creating additional quote-unquote additional projects. They're basically little snapshots of your project. Okay, they're no more than just kind of like a save as, except the name of the project reflects when you did it. Okay, which is it's not fancy, but it's helpful. Okay, so at this point we'll start a new project here. And we'll say this is just for testing a list view. Particularly, can we change the selection index to highlight a particular item? Okay. So we will put in a list view here. So put a list view here. And we'll use a button to initiate the entire operation. So here's a button. And that's all we're going to use. So first, we'll use the button. And say when the button is clicked, we'll do something to list view. First thing to do is to set all its elements. So we set all the elements of list view 1 to a particular list of strings. Doesn't have to be long, just have to have a few text items. So we'll just make it have 3 items in the list. There we go. So we'll have ABC, 1, 2, 3, and XYZ. Okay, nothing fancy here. Then the next item we're going to do is to change the selection index. So we'll set the selection index to the middle one, which is the number 2. So now we specify 2 as the selection index. And I'm not going to do anything else at this point. I'm just going to build the APK and test it. I do have one more thing I want to test, but later. I just want to see if the item is going to be highlighted. Switch back to my text box. This time we have a different program to upload and install. Test list view. Switch back to the emulator and just back up, back up, back up. And test list view is here. Oh, I guess not this one. Test list view, there we go. Okay. Click it. And it doesn't really select the item. Now that may be because, oh, okay. It's, when I change the focus, then it starts to highlight XYZ, which is the 3rd item. But I thought I wanted to highlight, the 2nd item. Let's click it again. Huh. This is by clicking the tab button. Okay, let's click on the first one. Use the tab button. Okay. When I click the button, which is supposed to highlight the 2nd item, it doesn't actually do it. Okay. So there's some code that is limited. There's a limitation of App Inventor. There's one more thing I want to do with this program. To test just one more thing. I want to know whether setting the selection index will also change the selection itself. Okay, to see if those two are linked correctly. So now we'll also set label 1 text to the selection of the list view component. There we go. If this works, if the selection is reflecting the selection index correctly, but it's just visually not displaying, I have something to try to see if I can quote-unquote fix or get around the problem. But we'll test this one first before we attempt to get around. There we go. Click. Okay, so it does work correctly. When I click the button, it actually does reflect the selection property does sync with selection index. So when I change the selection index, it would actually change the selection accordingly. But visually, it is not displaying it, which is the problem. Okay. Yep.
But can you change the text color of it?
Of the selection.
Yeah, when it's selected, change the text color as well.
But it's already set to gray, it's just not reflecting it. Okay, let me see if I understand your point exactly here. So we go back to designer, go back to the list view. I
No,
don't.
it wouldn't work.
Huh?
It wouldn't work.
It wouldn't work because it's already set to light gray. It's just not showing it. Okay, so at this point I'm going to see if I can do something to get around this problem, because it is now pretty clear to me that it is not my code. It is actually App Inventor not doing it correctly. So what I'm going to do in the blocks here is done something that is, well, I wouldn't call it exactly good coding, but it's not bad coding either. So I'm going to turn visibility to false, just so that it doesn't display, and then we'll turn it back on again, the very end here. So it's forcing the screen to refresh the list view. Now maybe the refreshing will automatically get it done. Maybe when I set the selection index internal to App Inventor, it just did not ask the list view component to refresh itself. So by turning off visibility and then turn it back on, it has to refresh it. It has to draw it again. So let's see if this will fix the problem. And by the way, this is the hacker of me talking, because it's well established that the program is not working. But even though it's not working, I want to know whether I can do something to get around the problem. Obviously, the next thing I should do is to send an email to report a bug so that people over at MIT can fix it. Now, this kind of approach to get around the problem is okay when you're running an app that doesn't really do anything. If something goes wrong, it won't. Nothing too terrible is going to happen. I would not apply this approach to automotive repair. Like if your car won't start or the brake has a problem, I wouldn't try to circumvent the ABS module just so they can drive your car on for that day. That may not be the most advisable way to do things. But with programs, I feel comfortable doing it. Okay, so let's start it again and click it. Still not working. So apparently there's no way to get around this one, which is a bummer. Time to do a bug report to App Inventor. Has anyone done that, reporting a bug? Well, based on what you see on the screen, do we know where to get started with this? See this button here? Or see this link here? Report an issue. Let's click it. Okay, so it is a Google group. Join group to post. There we go. And it's using my Dr. Tag 2016 Spring profile, which is okay. It's not a problem. Link it. And automatically subscribe if I post a topic. So this way, if someone replies to my topic, I get an email. All right. So get help, ask general question. Okay, where's the reporting an issue? Troubleshooting. Okay, let's try that. That's not helping. That's not for reporting problems. How do I get back to where I was? The back button is not working, so okay, we'll deal with that. I'll deal with that later. All right, so this program is basically working the best I can make it to work. You can make it fancier too. Okay, if you want to make it fancier, be my guest. You can have additional properties, associated with an item. So in addition to subcategories and the description of the item itself, you can also have, other things, okay? Now, up to this point, I'm pretty sure most of you have noticed, and I'm surprised that nobody has asked a question. When you look at the apps that I have installed into the emulator, okay, let's go back to this here, you can see that the icon representing the apps, they're all like this, okay? It's a big Android holding the hands of a little Android for App Inventor, okay? Well, I think that's what it's representing. So the question is, if this is not what if this is not what you want your app to look like, what are you going to do about it? Let's take a look at the properties over here. Let's look at screen 1. Just kind of go through all the properties. So app name, is test list view in this case. Background image, close, screen animation. Here we have icon. So in screen 1, and I think in screen 1 only, you can specify an icon for the application. So if that little big Android holding the hands of a little Android is not what you want to use as the icon of your own application, you can change it. You can change the icon to something else. Are we doing okay so far with the idea? Okay. How many people have already created an icon for your own application? Okay, 2. Okay, very good. So it's just a bitmap. Okay, it's just a bitmap. So in this case, I can create a bitmap pretty quickly. So we go to applications, we go to multimedia, go to graphics, and then we can use Inkscape, which is kind of like a freehand type of program. You can create something really quick and dirty. So I'm going to use a pencil tool and draw a happy face. Okay, there we go. And we want to make the lines a little bit more pronounced. Go to right click. Huh? They used to have properties.
Right there, go under
fill and stroke.
Yes.
Fill and stroke. So you go to stroke paint, and we want to. It's supposed to be black already. Opacity. Okay, so everything looks good, and we can increase the width. There we go, like that. Okay, that's good enough. Okay, so now we reselect the whole thing and export it. So we'll go ahead and export this as a PNG. It's squarish. Okay, good enough. So we'll export it over here. Let's just call this app icon.png. Click export. Okay. Now we go back to App Inventor. Upload the file. Yeah, it's pretty crude. I don't have a drawing tablet here. I was just using my mouse. I mean, if you think about just using a mouse, that's not too bad. There we go. So now we go to icon, and then we select this one as the icon of the application. All right, I think that's all we need. So go ahead and build the application again, because this time we just want to know that whether the icon is taking effect or not.
So every single time you install it on the emulator, does it keep adding like a new installation, or is it going to update the previous?
It just updates. So it replaces the other installation that we had installed earlier. So that's why we have a -R for replace. Okay, we go back to the emulator. Oh, wrong app. There we go. And you can see test list view now has a happy face. Okay, I know it's not really a big deal, but still. But this is a problem that I cannot, that's out of what I can do to fix, because by changing selection index, it's not refreshing the display. I try my best to kind of get around the problem by turning off the visibility and turning the visibility back on. That did not do a single thing. I don't think there's anything else I can do to make that work. Okay, let's see in the list view, can I change the selection itself? I don't think that is the case, but we'll give it a try. Okay, we can't change the selection itself. Okay, so that's one possibility. So not only are we changing selection index, so maybe by changing the selection it will work. Okay, so we'll give it a try. And we want the second item. I forgot that I put it here already. It's 1, 2, 3. So we'll just right click, duplicate this block, and just stash it over here. So these two blocks should do exactly the same thing. We know the top one did not change the visibility of the item that is already selected. So we'll just give it one more try and see if the second one would do it. All right, one more time. I'm not putting a whole lot of hope in this one. There's no way to force a list view to refresh. Nope, did not do a single thing. All right, so I couldn't, I could not get this to work. I'm not too worried about this. All right, so getting back to the original app, the only purpose of this app is just to test it. So it really is just boot logger that is the main point I wanted to show today. So are there any questions about the code that I did today? Any questions, any comments?
I just have a question about the
Yeah.
icon. You didn't specify the size of your source file.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a limitation as far as how big your source file can be, or should you reduce it to a 2200 say by 200 pixel source?
That is a good question. I do not know. I just know that it rescale everything.
It does rescale it.
It will both rescale the horizontal and the vertical, but separately. So if you have an image that is originally kind of like in a landscape mode, the proportions will be off if you use it as an icon, because it wants to make everything a square.
Right. But the compiler actually was preparing the icon by compressing it to
Correct.
the standard size.
Right. So the icon or the bitmap is known as an asset, which is the same thing. Okay, so you can see that this one does not have an icon. Or let me click on the screen itself. So this screen has no icon because it's not screen 1. But if you click on screen 1, then it has an icon. You can actually set the icon of screen 1. So screen 1 is definitely different from all the other screens, because it actually represents the app itself. At the same time, it is also the first screen of the app.
I see.
Yeah, App Inventor doesn't really have the concept of, okay, these are the properties of the app itself, and then these are the screens, and those are the properties of each screen. It simplified everything by making screen 1 also representing stuff that is in the app itself. So that's also why in screen 1, you will also see stuff that you don't see in other screens, including version code and version name. That stuff is not available in all of the other screens. Only screen 1 has these two properties. The worst part, I think, is you cannot see version code and version name in your own app. There's no way to retrieve that as far as I know. So, are there any questions about the icon thing? I mean, other than what you just mentioned? Okay. So, how many people are now planning to use some kind of resource file to be packaged within your app itself? Can be bitmaps, can be audio files, can be stuff like that. Or is no one doing that? Okay. Now, yeah, if you're embedding an application, or excuse me, if you're embedding a file as a resource, the way you access the file is a little bit tricky. Okay, in case you haven't noticed already. Okay, so going back to here. The way I do it, because I always download the APK file and then redo it. So the way I do it in the initialization, let me locate the initialization code first. It's hard to find stuff when they rearrange things a lot. Okay, let's collect all the blocks and then arrange all the blocks by category. It has to do with the initialize part of the screen, so it's this block here. So expand just one block. Okay, so this is the way I access the file. It is known as //emotions.txt. But this name is only usable when you're dealing with the APK file. If you're running the program using AI Companion, then it has a different path name. So you just want to keep that in mind, and that's also why personally I would like to just use the APK file approach to debug a program, because this way I don't have to worry about this part either. Because when you read the documentation on a file and how you can ask to read a file name, it gives you a pretty long description here. And a part of the description, I can't use the mouse pointer because it will lose the focus. So if you read this text here, it tells you that depending on whether you're using AI Companion or whether you're having an application that is already done, the path is different. Okay. To read assets packaged with an application, so these are all included, you start the file name with //. Okay, so it says it will also work with Companion, but I have read documentations where they indicate otherwise. It will be read from the application private storage for packaged app and from this folder for the Companion. So it says it should work in either case, but I haven't really tested it because I haven't used the AI Companion for a long time now. Are there any questions about the topic that we have talked about today? No questions? So we do have an exam on Wednesday, okay? So the first thing you might want to do, just kind of go for studying, is to download all the files that I have uploaded, especially the ones that I uploaded this semester. I know there are other files that I have uploaded, but the ones that I have uploaded this semester, those are particularly important because they reflect what we have talked about in this class. Okay. Any questions? Yep.
Is it going to be the same basic layout as the last one?
Yeah, it's going to be about the same thing. I will give you a project that is either partially done, or I will give you something that is easy to do so you can start from scratch. But I will describe what the finished product is supposed to do and then grade it accordingly. But this time I think I'll stage it so that you can turn in multiple files, one for each stage. So this way, if you cannot finish the entire thing, but you can finish 2 out of 3 stages, then you will still get partial credit for the stages that you have completed, even though the third one, you're working on it and it has not been completed. Okay. Any other questions? It's going to be the same thing, open book, open notes, obviously open web, because otherwise we cannot get App Inventor to work. But you have to kind of think about how you want to do it, because if you use the PCs supplied here in the lab, then you have to kind of go through all kinds of gyrations to make it work. If you bring your own laptop computer with everything already installed and you have been using it for your projects already, then you have a known environment that is known to work. So I think that would be a better approach. If you don't have a laptop computer to bring with you and you just kind of want to do the same thing that I do, I can look into preparing a thumb drive for that purpose. It's not going to be easy though. It probably will only work for the older emulator, because the new emulator does require the new Android SDK or Android Studio to be installed, and that's kind of a big chunk as well. All right. So without anyone telling me otherwise, I'm going to assume that you guys will arrange for your own PC to take the exam, like the first one. Okay. All right, so I'm going to stop the lecture at this point. We'll take a short break, 10 minutes, and then when we come back, if you guys have any questions, I'll go ahead and answer those questions when we get back. Just going to stop the